I called my mom, and it went straight to voicemail.
What time was that?
I've called her a couple times today, so I called her probably midday, around lunchtime. I called her another time before dinner, and then I called her after dinner. And then after dinner was when my wife was like, if you're real worried, she's 15 minutes away, just drive over.
Okay.
I walked into the front door. It smelled like gas or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
I immediately got worried, turned right, turned left, so I was standing in the living room, could see through. I saw the gun on the kitchen table, and I saw her from the shoulders up.
Okay.
It looked like there was red or purple by her neck, and I just immediately walked right back out.
When we initially got our radio call, the son contacted 911 to let us know that he had found his mother. As a sudden death or a suspicious death, our body cams are designed that when our lights and siren go on, they automatically come on because you don't know exactly what you're walking into.
Everything's been all recorded. She's inside,
Straight ahead to the right. I haven't even gone into the kitchen yet.
You said there's a gun in there?
There's a gun. She has 2 shotguns and a handgun. There is a shotgun sitting on her kitchen table. From the distance that I was away from her, it looked like it was red around her neck.
All right. Is there any reason why a shotgun would be out?
I do not know. She does have...
Stay back over here. I'm going to wait for another unit to arrive before I go in, just in case.
Dealing with a potential weapon inside of it really heightens your awareness because you want to be extra careful since you don't know what's inside that residence. Officers go around the back of the house to make sure that nothing would be coming from us from behind.
Anything back here?
This is locked.
Did he say it looked like she was shot?
No, just looked like, from what he said, looked like she was strangled. But he saw her and open window up top. That's the only points.
29 and 8.
See what this is unlocked real quick.
You said there's a shotgun on the table?
Yeah.
They called us in from home, and when I got there, the street was pretty busy with a lot of police officers and everything. In the back, there was a building, and so we ended up doing a search there.
Police department.
Good.
So once we make the scene safe, we want to check the status of that victim. Her son told the officers that he saw her on the floor. You want to get to that victim as soon as you can.
Yeah.
Frank's gonna stand up.
Stand in the back. Okay. All right. Just don't touch anything. Get. Former County Police. Anyone inside? Shotgun facing us.
He's in the kitchen, there are guns in the house.
I got a closed door to my left here, 2 other rooms to clear. Alright. Take that bathroom real quick. Clear.
She laying on the floor right here, shotgun room. Alright, I'm gonna advance, there's another room in the back. What are you doing?
Gotcha.
Former County Police!
I remember there was quite a bit of blood on the floor, lady inside, and it was very obvious that she was deceased.
Time of death is 2024.
Alright, we've got gloves on.
Yeah.
Never mind. I was gonna say turn the stove off, but I don't want you to get too close.
Yeah, you can. Yeah, the medic can reach over. Yeah. Okay. I got you. Yep. Cool, thanks.
inside. We had a gas smell. It's a very dangerous situation because the least little bit of a spark obviously could set something like that off, and you don't want that. You don't know if the actual suspect was hoping that maybe that it would take and ignite in some way.
She's obviously dead. I'm guessing the wind is going to be on her back. I'm assuming you guys don't want me to roll her or move her.
Yeah, no, nothing yet. Nope.
Do we have info on her?
We have possible on name. I don't have any date of birth yet. We can get it from the son is on scene. All I have right now is Cindy Testerman.
My mom was very unique, very original, and oftentimes just on like opposing ends of a spectrum. She was like a flower child, like grew up in the 60s, and she was really drawn to like the hippie movement. Like she was a caretaker. When I was very young, she opened up a daycare center in the house, and she ran that daycare center until I was a teen, always taking care of other people's children. Then my grandfather got sick, and she moved in with him to take care of him. That evening, while I was driving over, the worry was really starting to set in. I pull up out front, and I walk to the door, and I notice that it's ajar. Just a smell hits me that I didn't know what it was. And as I continue to kind of step forward through the living room, I see that she's on the ground. She's in the kitchen area, on the other side of the kitchen island. I can see her from shoulders up, and that was as far as I stepped. I stopped right in the middle of the living room, and I called to her. And I was like, Mom? Mom? And there was no response. And so I panicked. Like I turned around, I walked back out to the front porch, and I immediately called 911. Seeing her, like, it's just frozen into my brain. And the smell in the house, I still don't know exactly what that smell was. I don't want to, but I couldn't even think. I didn't think that my fears that had crept into my brain while I was driving over, I didn't expect any of that to be real. Like, hey, I wonder what's happening here. What's the worst that it could be? I never imagined that it could actually be the worst.
Cindy was dead in the kitchen. So I remember the first thing being that it looked pretty violent. There was a lot of blood. And then there was actually some footwear impressions throughout the house that were made with the blood as well.
There was a lot of trauma to Cindy's upper body. Those were all knife wounds, as well as some defensive injuries. She did fight back some. It was a situation where the suspect was able to suffocate and then stab her multiple times.
It was really odd because there's this shotgun on the table. And as far as I can tell, it wasn't involved in the murder at all. So what's the reason for killing this woman? Didn't really make any sense at first. There's no knife, so we knew we had an outstanding weapon that needed to be found.
There's drawers that are all displaced and stuff. On the second story, there's a safe on the ground in the back bedroom. It's laying on the ground in the middle of the floor. It looks out of place.
The house itself had been ransacked. It was pretty clear that things were in disarray, stuff had been stolen. There were some overturned drawers and a jewelry box. It was clear that somebody had gone through and pulled things out and just dumped the jewelry and went out with it.
As far as the safe being out, that can mean anything. And the person who committed this crime may have gone there initially to take and do a robbery, or may have known that the victim had money or assumed that the victim had money. So, again, not knowing what that person's actual motive was, you could surmise anything.
We learned that her car, a Mercury Grand Marquis, was gone. So one of the hardest things is kind of looking at these bits and pieces and trying to make sense of it. What could this story be? Stuff has been stolen, so you've got the robbery, but it's a really personal attack too. So anybody can break in and steal stuff, but why kill her as well?
When's the last time you saw her?
Like,
Or talked to her?
the last time I talked to her, Wednesday maybe. We traded or she sent me a text on Friday that I didn't respond to. Just of her friend's daughter that got married.
You get your ID on you?
I do.
You could tell that Rob Testerman talked to his mom on a very regular basis. So, of course, it was his natural instinct when his mom isn't answering and calls are going to voicemail that, he needed somebody to go check on her.
This was my grandfather's house. My mom moved in to take care of him toward end of life, and so she stayed here after he left.
Okay.
Deceased.
Gotcha.
And so she's been in this house for about 5 years.
Okay.
Prior to that, she grew up in this house. She was born here and lived here until she was 19, and then came back about 5 years ago.
It was really clear right away that she didn't have anything going on that would cause a problem with somebody. She didn't have, enemies. This is a lady who really stayed to herself and didn't bother anybody. Her son had access to her home surveillance camera.
Looking at the home security system, so if we go back to, that's yesterday, so Friday, I can see her coming home. That's my mom. So I can see her coming home. And then Saturday, this gentleman comes up in the morning. It looks like maybe she talks to him because that has a microphone. And then he leaves.
And there were a couple different videos of this guy coming to the house in the days leading up to the murder. And we're really fortunate because we see him, same guy, and he's come and talked to her a few times. He'd pop up and they would talk. We had no idea who that was, and it's anyone's guess as who this person is. And, am I gonna be the one guy who gets a video of their suspect and can't figure out who it is? So we really started trying to figure out where this guy came from. We knew Cindy's car was missing, and officers in the area are looking for it, and ultimately it's found not far from that neighborhood in the city on the east side. Some officers had run the tag and found that it was reported stolen, so they stopped the car. This is a vehicle that we know was stolen during the course of a murder, so we need to expect kind of the worst case scenario.
Give me your keys.
It's not the same person from the video at Cindy's house, but how do they end up with this car? And so we go and interview them.
Somebody sold me this car.
Again, we're trying to investigate everything right now. We got the car. You got the second one?
We have 3 people in the car, and people don't want to get caught in a stolen car. It's a felony, so they can be really dangerous. But then on top of that, this is a vehicle that we know was stolen during the course of a murder. And there's a real strong possibility that whoever's in this vehicle is involved in the murder, and we want to make sure everybody's safe.
I didn't steal anything. I'm trying to call my husband because
Can't make no phone calls right now.
that's crazy.
Do you have the title for this?
What's in the right? The man sold this car to me and my husband. I didn't steal anything. I didn't know the car was stolen. I wouldn't buy no stolen car.
She said they bought the car from someone. They didn't exchange a title or anything like that, but the story at least made sense. It kind of made it clear that these people were not involved in the murder. They bought the car from someone they knew as Bird, which doesn't do us a whole lot of good at that point either. He's a white male, thin to average build, seemed to be pretty tall, and late 20s, early 30s. He had shorter, light brown hair that kind of was consistent with the guy in the video, but we still need to figure out who he is.
I've had other officers at the crime scene start what we call canvassing the area, doing initial interviews with the local residents to see if anybody saw or heard anything out of the ordinary, and if so, what they could tell us.
As we go around the neighborhood, our goal is to figure out who this guy is that may have sold Cindy's car. It is the same person from the video at Cindy's house.
Is she home? It's taped off like a crime scene.
Yeah, we can't talk about much right now, but we're just trying to investigate.
Her father just passed away. It was his house. I used to sit there over there and play checkers with him.
Wow. Is her car usually there?
Yeah. And I told my wife, I said, Cindy's car ain't been there all day.
We hadn't seen Cindy or a guy driving her car off.
Who stays in this house here?
This is another story.
Okay. Is anyone currently here?
We learned there's a lady across the street from Cindy named Judy, but nobody knows where Judy is.
I don't know where she's at, in a rehab or something. So I don't know where she's at.
Yeah.
I haven't seen her in 3 months.
With the concern of her neighbor reporting her as missing, of course the police go over to the location and attempt to locate Judy, and they're unable to do so.
Now I'm called in for one murder, and in the process of investigating it, we're also working now a missing persons case as well. It definitely kind of ramps things up a little bit. Everyone that we spoke to had a different story as to where they had last seen her or heard where Judy was. So a lot of people had been told that she was at rehab, but these stories didn't all match up because some people said it was, it's just a week or a certain period of time that didn't match up with what the other people had heard. And so it's a little suspicious at this point. Ultimately, we're cognizant of the fact that she's not around, and we have to figure out what happened to Judy. One of the neighbors, Linda, said, I don't know what's going on with Judy. So I started talking to her.
I didn't think that Judy was really missing until after I heard about Cindy having been killed, and then I really got concerned. 1 and 1 added up to 2 for me for that. Something was really wrong with Judy if Cindy is deceased.
Linda called us a little concerned about Judy. Is she really missing, and ultimately where she is.
Did you hear from Judy at all?
No, she is not around.
I can't seem to come up with her.
Her stepson, his first name is Ryan. That's his name, Ryan. I don't know his last name, but I found his first name, Ryan. And she was gone for a couple weeks, or about a week or so, and I was told, told that she had gone into a rehab. I do believe she has a substance abuse problem because she has some health issues, and I think she was abusing some Percocets. But that's only rumors from the neighborhood. And that's when Ryan showed up again, and he was there, and he kind of told them, I'm here now, I'll take care of her. And we didn't see her except to hear a rumor that she went into rehab again.
We learned for the past few weeks, a young guy has been staying with Judy. Linda thought it could be her stepson, but ultimately, I'm trying to figure out who this guy is, but it could be the guy in the video. So we end up having to go back to police headquarters and really start digging into different incidents that had taken place over there at Judy's house. And ultimately, I'm able to find a pretty old police report that referenced a stepson, Ryan McGuire. So my partner and I start pulling up photos of McGuire, and we were comparing the pictures we have of him from the video to these previous mug shots. And I remember my partner looking at the one picture and going, I think that's him. We put them side by side, and here we've got our guy, but still need to find him and Judy.
Judy was just this quiet woman that just gardened and everything. She was just a sweet lady. Our backyards match. In fact, there was a gate that led from my backyard to her backyard. So I could go through to her yard and she could go through to mine. And Cindy lived right across from Judy.
So growing up, my mother knew Judy's parents. They were, I believe, also original owners in that neighborhood. So you had a good idea what was going on over there because the houses faced each other.
I hadn't seen her in over 4 weeks, probably. The last time I saw Judy, actually, I was in my backyard. She's just not in a facility like they were telling me she possibly was. I knew something was wrong.
Cindy and Judy, they're similar in age. They were both living alone in this neighborhood, didn't necessarily have any aspects of their life that made them a real likely target for somebody. Nobody knows where Judy or her stepson, who she was living with, is, and so we actually got a search warrant and went into Judy's house to find out if someone's in there hiding.
Police search warrant.
Everybody has to stop for a second and think, what are we going to find out next?
I'm with you.
Baldwin County Police. Police search warrant.
I'm with you.
Police search warrant.
And so we ended up going into Judy's house and doing a search there and looking for her stepson or evidence of what happened to Judy. Our hope was, best case scenario, he's just hiding in there.
I'll hold the steps, all right? Go with me. All right, you're holding the steps.
I got you.
Baldwin County Police. Anybody up here?
That's the basement. I got the basement. Okay.
Cat, come at.
The officers do a protective sweep at the very beginning when they arrive to make sure that he's not still there hiding and gonna pop out.
The bedroom's closed, door on the left. I'm gonna hold this room. If you guys go right, I'm gonna hold this room in the hallway.
Police search warrant, police. On cat.
Alright, go ahead. Alright, so push up, take on left the thing.
Alright, shit there. Baldwin County Police. Search warrant, police.
After the initial sweep of the house, we know that there's nobody inside at that point hiding from us, so We assume that her stepson is now on the run. And we're looking for him, and we're really striking out.
Judy was missing, but my mom was gone. And so as an only child, really everything fell to me to take care of. These like unpleasantries that follow behind losing someone that just seem like they pile on and compound the feelings. Going to the funeral home, identifying the body, determining what her last wishes would be as far as like disposition, ordering an urn, like all of these sort of tasks. And then once those tasks were done, then I fell apart. We had a really nice wake for her. We had a celebration of life at the same place that we would have all of our family gatherings. We ended up getting the family together, her friends. Could just kind of like compartmentalize the grief and set that aside for the time being. But eventually it was something that I had to face.
I went to the service for Cindy. It's just so sad for them, for their families, for us. Cindy's death was the catalyst that got me really serious that there's got to be something wrong with Judy. I figured, okay, she's got to be somewhere. Where is she?
So at that point, we've got McGuire identified, and we're confident that he's the last person with Cindy Testerman in that house, and he's who drives her car off. We got to come up with him. And the pressure is on because, as I mentioned, we've got some concerns now as well about Judy, and is he a threat to the public? So we've got everybody scouring the area for Ryan McGuire.
I was immediately like, anything that I can do to try to help. We knew that the wallet was stolen, so I was like, let me log into the credit cards and see if there's any activity on them. And so when we get on there and we see that there are purchases that day being made at Foot Locker and a gas station, and so I'm getting on the call with the homicide detectives and just sending this information over. Like, this is a charge, it happened here, it's at East Point Mall.
So while we're looking for him out and about, we're also running around to these different businesses where the cards have been used, and we're starting to recover video, and we can see it's McGuire who's running around using Cindy's cards that have clearly been stolen. It almost seemed like he was out enjoying himself. There was a point where he went through a drive-through ATM in the black car. That's Judy's car. We learned he was living in the hotel along the Pulaski Highway corridor on Route 40. So that was one of the places that detectives from our apprehension team went, and they ended up finding the car, and they saw him actually come out and then go back into one of the motel rooms right there. Now we know exactly which room he's in and be able to apprehend him. So we had been working pretty hard trying to figure out where he would go. Now we've got him, and the pressure is on. So we got a search warrant and went into the room. Inside, it's like the jackpot, because a lot of the stolen property was in there in both Judy's name and Cindy's. So we've got some jewelry in there, some debit cards, credit cards, and things like that. Some stuff that really he was going to have a hard time explaining. And we take him into custody.
I just got to let you know my camera is on, so I'm recording you, but not that it's facing you, but anything that you're saying is getting recorded. So I got to let you know that, all right?
So he's transported to police headquarters, and that's where I'm gonna meet him for the first time.
Anything I get a cigarette, man?
Yeah, probably. I'll have to find one. It might take me a minute, but yeah, I don't think that's a problem. Are you good? Anything else you need?
I just want a cigarette. You give me a cigarette right now, I'll tell you everything y'all need to know.
Okay. Yeah, let me see what I can do. You got a preference? I don't know that I
don't give anything.
Really?
Yeah.
A cigarette? Yeah. All right, man. He wanted a cigarette, and I was hesitant to give him one right away because I kind of wanted to build a little rapport. Go through this real quick. What's your last name?
Guire.
M-C-G-U-I-R-E, right?
Yeah.
Ryan Michael. Yeah. Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law. You have the right to talk with a lawyer at any time before or during any questioning. I remember talking with my sergeant and saying, you know, we've got so much good evidence in this case already that, you know, if he tells me to pound sand, okay. You know, I'm completely prepared for that because, you know, this is a guy who had spent some time in jail. It would be a surprise if he's willing to talk to me. What's been going on with you? What can you tell me?
Well,
you said you tell me everything, right?
What's this one? What's this for?
Okay. You said you've been staying at the motel there?
Yeah, I stayed there for a couple of days.
Okay. What about before that?
I've been staying with that lady.
Who's that?
The huge car I had.
Judy.
Yeah.
Okay. What's your relationship to her?
She's like, I don't know, my stepmom or something like that.
Okay. She let you use the car and everything?
Yeah.
Alright, nice lady. Where's she at these days?
Yeah, listen. I need a cigarette. I'm not saying nothing else. Tell you a cigarette.
Okay.
I'm gonna tell you everything you need to know. She's gone too. She's dead too. Just to let you know, she's dead too. You're gonna charge me with that one too. So I'll tell you where she's at as soon as I get a cigarette.
Alright, man.
I know I'm here for the one across the street.
What's that?
I'm here for what? Across the street.
Yeah, man. I'm not gonna beat around the bush with you. That's what it is, okay?
Man, I'll tell you where Judy's and everything is at, so you can charge me with that one too. So
alright, bro. I appreciate it.
Let
me get you a cigarette. And then I'm like, what just happened? He surprised us all. So, you know, he says what he says. This is about the lady across the street? Yeah, because I killed her too, and you're going to charge me with both of them. So I get this just kind of bombshell statement from him. All my coworkers, the other detectives, are listening to this. So when I walked into the squad room, they had the look on their face like I felt like, I can't believe that just came out of his mouth. And somebody said, get him a carton of cigarettes, just keep him talking. It's they don't like people smoking in here. So allegedly suck up the smoke. I don't know how good it works, but good shot. Just get the lighter back when you're done. They're not supposed to be smoking in an interview room, but that's one of the things that we do sometimes, to let them smoke because we want them to be comfortable and talk to us.
So where do you go first?
Well, I can start from the beginning.
Y'all's not gonna find Judy without me telling you where she's at.
Where's she at?
She's still in her house.
Okay.
If y'all take me there, I'll show you where she's at.
Alright, can you explain it to me?
She got high, she was getting high, so she asked me to shoot her up, I shot her up and she OD'd. So.
You said you gave her an injection too, right? Just to make sure.
No, yeah, she was still, she wanted, she came out of it, she was like, she didn't feel good, she wanted me to shoot up again. Okay. So I shot her up, and that did it.
He actually admits that they were using drugs and that he intentionally overdosed her, knowing that it would kill her. When you went to Judy's, was that just because...
She called me out of the blue, helping her get off the drugs.
Oh. Okay.
And I said, damn, I could just stay here, get rid of her, and just keep using all her money every month.
Yeah.
That's what I've been doing.
in a matter of seconds, all of a sudden, now we've found out that he killed Judy, and he's gonna tell me where the body is. So that was definitely a shock. And I know I need to find out really what happened with Cindy. Why did it happen, and how did it happen?
Where in the house was that? I was in the house.
Whose house? Whose house were you in?
Judy. I was in both houses.
Y'all guys, did it smell up?
Yeah.
It stinks. Doctor's been fucking loud, perfume in there.
Okay.
It's upstairs in the bedroom.
Is that right? Okay. What is it, like a hidden compartment type thing?
It's down outside in the bed. Where that pink towel was on.
Okay.
Upstairs in the bedroom.
How long ago was that? You remember?
It's about a long week.
Once he drops that bomb on me about Judy, I need to find out everything that he can tell me about what happened with Cindy Testerman.
What happened across the street?
Shoot us 3 questions.
About what?
About Judy.
She's realized something's going on there.
I guess.
Or what were we doing over her house?
What that?
So you know who that is?
Yeah, Cindy.
Cindy. Yeah. So she called you? You sent the phone number or whatever?
Yeah, she called me from Judy's house.
Okay. You said you come over and talk to her?
Yeah, smoke some weed with her.
Okay. And how did that go?
That's not too good.
Did I get that? I mean, how did it kind of happen?
That's something.
Because she was asking too much.
And then he said she was ready to call the cops.
Oh, yeah. Okay. All right, so how did it happen?
Why, how though?
Choked her and then stabbed her.
And so McGuire ultimately tells us Judy's in this chest. So we run back out there with a search warrant and recovered the chest and find her in that house. The knife Ryan had used to kill Cindy was found in the motel room along with his other property, and Nike tennis shoes with blood stains. Forensics is able to confirm that the blood on those shoes was Cindy Testerman's through DNA. Looking at everything we found, we're kind of able to put this picture together of what led to these murders. Ryan McGuire struggled with addiction, and he was looking for money and trying to support his habit, and he found a source in Judy. So ultimately he gets greedy and he kills her so that he can keep taking advantage of that money. Judy was a friend of Cindy, and Cindy, she had been asking too many questions about her friend Judy. He kills her, but ultimately his downfall is just his greed. He ran around trying to get money, sold the car, and was using the cards for as much as he could.
Ryan McGuire had pled guilty to the 2 counts of premeditated first-degree murder. Each family deserved justice, and that justice had to come in the form of a life sentence. I was extremely happy with the outcome in this case. So knowing that we had achieved justice in the form of those life sentences, that Ryan McGuire would never murder anyone's family member again.
My mother always put other people first through her entire life. I want to make sure that she's remembered for her kindness and her thoughtfulness and her ability to just treat other people so well. Seeing the kitchen when it was just completely gutted down, it was wild because there's so much family history in this house, and it's all gone. The family is gone, the house is gone. I haven't reconciled with that.
Creature was stirring, not even a mouse.
The last time I saw Judy alive, I was in my backyard and she introduced me to Ryan, telling me he was her stepson and that he could help me out at my house if I needed anybody to help with anything. She was just a sweet lady. And anytime you lose a sweet lady, but she's with God. And so is Cindy. And he's paying the price.
If I had the opportunity to speak to her, I would talk to her about her grandkids, just how bright and empathetic and creative they are. And it's amazing, like this creativity that is my mom. My kids got so much of that creativity. And I want to just demonstrate that for her. That like her spirit like lives on in them, and it's amazing.
The night never announces itself when it decides to turn violent. It sleeps in quietly, wearing the shape of an ordinary evening, the kind people forget as soon as it passes. The emergency call comes just before sunrise. The voice on the line is male, controlled, almost rehearsed, reporting a body found inside a private residence. No screaming. No panic. Just facts. Address. Name. Relationship. The house stands still, front door slightly open, as if someone stepped out for a moment and forgot to close it behind them. Inside, the air feels wrong. Too quiet. The living room is untouched, furniture lined with a suburban precision, family photographs frozen in mid-October. Down the hallway, the temperature drops. The bedroom window is cracked just enough to let in the cool night air, just enough to make the curtains breathe. The coroner will later determine the cause of death as strangulation, time of death somewhere between midnight and 3 in the morning. Long enough for the neighborhood to sleep. Long enough for a killer to leave without being seen. No forced entry. No damaged deluxe. No shattered glass. Police move through the house with practiced efficiency, documenting everything, touching nothing they don't have to. The kitchen tells a partial story. A single mug sits in the sink, tobacco string hanging over the edge, water still faintly warm. Outside, neighbors gathering clusters, whispering, speculating, their certainty growing louder with each repetition. No one heard a scream. No one saw a stranger. One man walking each dog remembers passing the house after midnight. The lights were off. Everything looked normal. The man who found the body introduces himself as Mark Bennett, Laura's younger brother. He says he came by to check on her after she didn't answer her phone. He says he said the sparrow she kept hidden outside. He says he found her like the sand cold immediately. Each clothes they are neat. Detectives note the sparrow. They note the lack of forced entry. They note that Mark Bennett knew the house well enough to walk straight to the bedroom without turning on lights. None of this makes him a suspect. Not yet. At the station, Laura Bennett's life is reduced to files and folders. Employment records show a consistent history. No disciplinary issues. No conflicts. Financial statements reveal nothing unusual. No large withdrawals. No debts. Phone records are reviewed line by line.
Mark is interviewed again. this time in a small room with no windows and a tape recorder on the table. He repeats his story without variation. Timeline intact. Emotions contained. He speaks about his sister with familiarity, not reverence. He describes her routines, her worries, her habits. He offers details investigators haven't asked for yet. The interview lasts over 2 hours. When it ends, there is still nothing concrete to hold on to. Forensics deliver frustration instead of clarity. No foreign DNA is recovered. No fibers inconsistent with the household. No defensive wounds on Laura's body. She either trusted the person who approached her or never had a chance to react. The profiler's assessment arrives days later, cautious but unsettling. The perpetrator likely knew the victim, likely felt comfortable in the home, likely did not fear recognition. The media moves in fast, turning the quiet street into a temporary stage. Laura's photograph fills television screens, her smile framed by captions that read, "Beloved teacher found dead," and "Community in shock." Reporters interview neighbors, co-workers, former students. Candlelight vigils form in the evenings, grief transforming into ritual. People want reassurance. They want a stranger to blame, a shadow that can be chased away. Police respond by chasing every lead that points outward. They question former co-workers. They review student families. They investigate a man Laura dated briefly years earlier. They search for prowlers, for drifters, for anyone who doesn't belong. Each lead dissolves under scrutiny. No threats. No sightings. No motive strong enough to kill. As weeks turn into months, the case slows. Detectives still revisit Mark Bennett, but always carefully, always politely. He cooperates every time. He never asks for a lawyer. He answers calls. He shows up. He grieves in public and keeps his private life quiet. Without evidence, suspicion remains just that, suspicion. Laura is buried under a clear spring sky. Mark delivers the eulogy. He talks about childhood secrets, about promises made after their parents died, about always looking out for each other. Some in the crowd find his words touching. Others feel something they can't name, a faint unease that has nowhere to go. The house is eventually sold. New families move in. The ceramic decoration hiding the spare key disappears. The neighborhood returns to routine, but the case does not close. Slides into a different state. Unresolved. Dormant. A cold case waiting for time to do what investigation could not. In 1992, there is no arrest, no trial, no resolution, just a file that never quite goes away, and a name written in the margins, never underlined, never crossed out. The brother. The closest relative. The one person who had access, opportunity, and a connection deep enough to be dangerous. The story does not end here. It only stops moving for a while. Time does not pass evenly after a murder. It stretches in some places, snaps in others, leaving behind a warped sense of before and after. In the weeks following Laura Bennett's death, investigators feel that distortion every day. The case is officially open, but momentum has slowed, replaced by repetition. The same questions asked in different rooms. The same answers spoken with slightly altered tones. The same quiet frustration settling in like dust. Detectives return to the crime scene with fresh eyes, hoping the house might confess something it didn't the first time. They walk the hallway again, count steps, measure distances, imagine movement in the dark. The bedroom feels smaller now, more intimate, the air heavier. They note how close the bed is to the door, how easily someone standing there could reach the light switch, how no fingerprints were lifted from it. Laura likely never tried to turn the light on. She never expected danger. They focus on the window. It was open an inch, maybe two. Not enough for entry. Just enough to let air circulate. Just enough to create the illusion of an outside presence. Investigators argue quietly about whether it means anything at all. Some believe it was staged, a suggestion meant to redirect attention. Others think it was simply habit. Laura liked fresh air when she slept. The case begins to split into interpretations, each plausible, none provable. Attention shifts to Laura's final day. Her co-workers describe it as ordinary. She taught her classes, graded papers, joked with colleagues in the break room. No visible distress. No mention of fear. She left the school parking lot alone, waved goodbye, drove home. Surveillance footage from a nearby gas station captures her car passing through an intersection around 6:40 p.m. She stops for groceries. She pays in cash. She smiles at the clerk. The tape becomes one of the last confirmed images of her alive. Back at her house, phone records indicate several incoming and outgoing calls that evening. Friends. Family. One call stands out not because it is suspicious, but because of its length. Mark Bennett. 83 minutes. Ending at 11:12 p.m., investigators listen to the silence on the line between numbers, trying to imagine what was said, what tone was used, whether the conversation carried tension or comfort. Mark says they talked about nothing important. About work. About life. About missing their parents. The kind of conversation you don't remember because it isn't meant to be remembered. Police tried to reconstruct Mark's night. He says he went home after work, ate dinner alone, watched television, went to bed around midnight. No witnesses. No receipts. No phone calls after 11. His car shows no mechanical issues. No reason it couldn't have made the drive to Laura's house and back unnoticed. But again, possibility is not evidence. The law demands more than what could have happened. The case file grows thicker, heavier, more unwieldy. Each lead adds paper without adding clarity. Detectives begin to feel the subtle pressure that accompanies unsolved crimes. Not overt commands but shifts in attention. Supervisors ask for updates less frequently. Resources are redirected. New cases arrive with fresh blood and fresh outrage. Laura Bennett's murder becomes yesterday's problem. The media, sensing the cooling, tries to reignite interest. Articles speculate about secret lovers, workplace disputes, unknown stalkers. Mark's name appears occasionally, always framed carefully. Not considered a suspect at this time. He notices. He reads everything. He doesn't respond publicly. Silence becomes his shield. Behind the scenes, detectives debate what they cannot say aloud. The absence of forced entry. The controlled nature of the killing. The lack of forensic evidence suggesting a stranger. They revisit family dynamics. After their parents' death 5 years earlier, Laura and Mark grew closer. Some describe it as supportive. Others use the word dependent. Laura helped Mark financially after his divorce. She offered emotional stability. She was, in many ways, his anchor. No one suggests a motive out loud, but it hangs in the air. Resentment, jealousy, fear of loss, or something darker that never leaves paperwork but lingers in intuition. Detectives are trained to distrust intuition. And yet, in cold cases, intuition is often all that remains. They interview Mark again months after the murder. This time the tone is subtly different. Fewer condolences. More pauses. They ask about money. He denies any conflict. They ask about Laura's plans. He says she wanted to travel, maybe move someday. The idea of her leaving seems to surprise him. His voice tightens. It is a small thing. Too small to record officially. But it is noticed. Forensics are rechecked. Evidence bags reopened. Nothing new emerges. The strangulation marks indicate sustained pressure, not sudden rage. Whoever did this was close enough to feel her breath stop. Close enough to watch her face. That kind of act changes people. Or it reveals what was already there. By the end of the year, the case is officially labeled inactive. Not closed. Just waiting. A cold case, though the term feels premature, like admitting defeat too early. Files are boxed and shelved. Detectives move on. But the murder does not disappear. It lingers in conversations, in local memory. In the subtle way neighbors still glance at the Bennett house when they drive by. Mark continues his life in fragments. He moves apartments. Changes jobs. Keeps his head down. Friends describe him as withdrawn, quieter than before. Grief, they say. Trauma. No one argues. There is no rule for how a brother should behave after losing a sister. Years pass. Technology advances. DNA analysis becomes sharper, more ambitious. Cold case units begin reopening files thought impossible to solve. Laura Bennett's name is pulled from storage more than once, but always pushed back. No biological evidence to test. No new witnesses. No confession. Until the late 2000s, when a detective nearing retirement requests one last review. He has carried the case with him, unresolved, uncomfortable. He rereads transcripts, listens to old tapes, studies photographs. What strikes him now is not what is present, but what is absent. No sign of struggle. No noise. No interruption. The crime happened smoothly. Too smoothly. He flags the case for future review, noting one line in the margin of his report. Consider internal access again. It is not an accusation. It is a reminder. The file goes back on the shelf, but it no longer sleeps. In the community, Laura becomes a symbol rather than a person. Her story is retold in brief, simplified versions. Teacher. Killed in her home. Unsolved. People shake their heads and move on. But for those who look closely, the unease never leaves. Because the killer was never identified. And because the house never showed signs of a stranger. The cold case waits, patient and silent, for the moment when the past becomes inconvenient again. When time, instead of erasing details, sharpens them. And somewhere within that waiting, the truth remains untouched, sealed behind the same calm exterior it wore on the night Laura Bennett died. Cold cases don't resurface with noise. They creep back in quietly, through paperwork, through a second look at something once dismissed as insignificant. Years after Laura Bennett's murder slipped into dormancy, her file is pulled from storage not because of a breakthrough, but because of a question that refuses to die. A question that has no urgency, only persistence. Who had the time, the access, and the patience to do this without leaving a mark? The cold case unit approaches the file without nostalgia or emotion. They weren't there in 1992. They didn't walk through the house when the air was still warm from breath that no longer existed. They see the case stripped of context, reduced to facts, photographs, transcripts. And in that reduction, patterns begin to stand out. The first thing they notice is how clean everything is. Too clean. Not in the sense of sanitation, but in the sense of narrative. No forced entry. No random violence. No escalation. The scene reads like a script written by someone who knew exactly how much was enough. Enough pressure. Enough time. Enough restraint. They reconstruct the timeline again, this time with digital tools unavailable decades earlier. Phone records are digitized, cross-referenced, plotted visually. Laura's final call with Mark Bennett becomes a focal point, not because of what is known, but because of what is unknowable. 83 minutes. No recording. No witnesses. Just two siblings connected by a line in the dark. Hours before one of them is dead. Investigators look closely at what happened next. According to Mark, the call ended around 11:12 p.m. He claims he went to bed shortly after. Laura was likely still awake. The kitchen mug supports that. The stop clock suggests movement later. Somewhere between that phone call and 2:17 a.m., the house transitioned from safe to lethal. Cold case detectives do not chase intruders first. They chase routines. They map Laura's habits. She locked doors automatically. She rarely opened the door late at night unless she recognized the person outside. She trusted family implicitly. That trust is written all over the crime scene. Invisible but unmistakable. The spare key re-enters the conversation. No longer a footnote but a mechanism. Who knew about it? Who had reason to use it without raising suspicion? Over the years, stories about the key have grown vague. People forget. Memories blur. But one fact remains stable. Mark Bennett knew exactly where it was. They review Mark's statements again. Not for contradictions, but for consistency. Consistency can be as revealing as error. His story has not changed in 20 years. Same wording. Same order. Same emotional beats. To some investigators, this suggests truth. To others, rehearsal. They listen to the 911 call again. Audio enhancement removes background noise, isolates breaths, pauses. Mark's voice is steady, controlled. He does not ask what to do. He does not sound disoriented. He reports the situation like someone describing a known outcome, not a shocking discovery. The dispatcher asks if Laura is breathing. Mark answers immediately. No. No hesitation. No uncertainty. He knew. This alone proves nothing. Trauma manifests differently. Grief can be quiet, but when stacked against everything else, it adds weight. Cold case investigators widen the lens. They examine Mark's life around 1992. Recently divorced. Financially unstable. emotionally dependent on his sister. Laura had helped him more than once quietly without telling others. She paid bills. She offered advice. She intervened when he spiraled. Support can become pressure. Care can curdle into resentment. They uncover something missed the first time. A life insurance policy. Modest but real. Laura listed Mark as beneficiary. It wasn't new. It wasn't secret. But it adds another layer to motive, however thin. Motive does not have to be greed. Sometimes it is fear of losing what you rely on. Investigators re-examine witness statements from neighbors. One detail once dismissed now resurfaces. A neighbor reported seeing a familiar car parked down the street late that night. Not unfamiliar. Familiar. At the time, it went nowhere because familiarity suggests innocence. Now it suggests camouflage. The car was never identified. Mark owned a vehicle matching the general description. Dark. Unremarkable. Common. The kind you forget as soon as it passes. Technology opens new doors, but it also highlights what is gone forever. No DNA. No cameras. No digital footprints. The case must live or die on narrative coherence. And the narrative is beginning to tighten around one figure. Cold case detectives contact Mark Bennett again. Now older, grayer, cautious. He is surprised but not offended. He agrees to speak. The interview is polite. Professional. They ask him to walk through that night again. He does. Perfectly. They ask him how long it took to drive from his place to Laura's house. He answers quickly. Too quickly. He has calculated this before. They ask him why he decided to check on her that morning. He says he had a bad feeling. Intuition. The word hangs in the air. Investigators exchange a glance. Intuition is not evidence. But intuition is often the language of guilt when logic runs out. They press gently. Why not call again? Why not wait until morning? Mark says he was worried. Worried enough to drive over. Worried enough to use the spare key. Worried enough to walk straight to the bedroom. Every step he took aligns perfectly with someone who already knew what he would find. Or someone who was about to. The interview ends without confrontation. Cold case detectives do not accuse without armor. They are building something slower. A structure strong enough to hold in court. Or at least strong enough to change the story officially. Meanwhile, public interest reignites. A local journalist uncovers that the case is being reviewed. Headlines resurface. 1992 teacher murder reopened. New look at old crime. Mark's name appears again cautiously in the margins. He feels it immediately. Friends ask questions. Coworkers grow distant. The past is no longer asleep. Investigators revisit the crime scene photographs. One image draws attention now. Laura's hands. Positioned neatly. No torn nails. No skin under her fingernails belonging to anyone else. She did not fight. That suggests trust or surprise. Strangers provoke resistance. Loved ones disarm it. They consult behavioral experts. The consensus is uncomfortable but consistent. The killer was calm. Familiar. Comfortable with proximity. Comfortable enough to stay until the end. Comfortable enough to leave the scene without panic. Cold cases rarely produce certainty. They produce convergence. Lines pointing in the same direction from different angles. Here those lines converge again and again on Mark Bennett. Not because he is evil in a dramatic sense, but because he is ordinary. And ordinary people commit the most convincing crimes. The file thickens with annotations, new theories layered over old ones. The original detectives are contacted, now retired. Some admit quietly that Mark always bothered them. Others defend him. Time has softened edges but not doubts. By the end of the review, the cold case unit reaches an internal conclusion. Not guilt beyond doubt. Not enough for arrest. But enough for something else. Enough to name him officially as a suspect. That decision is not taken lightly. Naming a suspect changes lives. It reshapes memory. It reframes grief. But the alternative is silence. And silence has protected this case for too long. The past does not erupt. It tightens. And as the file moves forward again, one truth becomes impossible to ignore. Laura Bennett did not let her killer in by mistake. She let them in because she trusted them. And trust, once weaponized, leaves no fingerprints. When a name is finally written into a case file under the word suspect, the air around that file changes. It becomes heavier, more dangerous. Every sentence is reread. Every decision carries weight. For the cold case unit, naming Mark Bennett is not an ending but a point of no return. From this moment on, the story of Laura Bennett's death will never sound the same again. The first consequence is procedural. Once a suspect is named, everything must be re-examined through that lens. Not to force guilt but to test whether the narrative collapses or holds. Detectives reopen every box, every envelope, every grainy photograph taken under fluorescent lights in 1992. They are no longer asking who could have done this but how would this look if Mark did. The spare key becomes central, no longer circumstantial but structural. Investigators photograph the porch from old images, note the height of the ceramic decoration, the angle from which the key could be retrieved without kneeling. It would have taken seconds. No noise. No hesitation. Practice motion. Someone who had done it before. Someone who didn't need to look. They examine Laura's locks again. No damage. No tampering. The door was opened cleanly, closed behind the intruder. This was not an entry made in panic or urgency. This was entry with confidence. Entry with entitlement. Detectives reconstruct the drive from Mark's apartment to Laura's house using modern mapping software. Late at night, minimal traffic, under 15 minutes. Even less if someone knew the shortcuts. Mark had grown up in this area. He knew the streets before they had names. The idea that he could make the trip unnoticed is not speculative. It is routine. They look at Mark's phone activity again. This time with different questions. Not just who did he call, but who didn't he call. After the 83-minute conversation with Laura, his phone goes silent. No outgoing calls. No incoming. For someone allegedly worried enough to drive across town the next morning, the silence feels calculated. As if the night had already resolved itself. Cold case detectives speak to Mark's ex-wife. In 1992, she was distant from the investigation, protective of her own boundaries. Now decades later she is more willing to talk. She describes Mark during that period as volatile, emotionally dependent, prone to intense moods followed by withdrawal. She recalls arguments about Laura, about how much time Mark spent talking to her, about how Laura seemed to know things about their marriage she shouldn't have. Mark leaned on his sister in ways that blurred lines. One memory stands out. Weeks before Laura's death, Mark had told his ex-wife that Laura was planning changes. New plans. New people. He sounded unsettled. Angry even. "She's all I've got," he said. At the time it sounded like grief talking. Now it sounds like fear. Investigators search for corroboration. They find a co-worker of Laura's who remembers her mentioning a difficult conversation with her brother. Nothing dramatic. Just tension. Laura had laughed it off, saying Mark worried too much, that he didn't like the idea of her becoming less available. It was said casually. Too casually to raise alarms then. Too clearly to ignore now. The crime scene photographs are studied again by forensic consultants who specialize in behavioral analysis. They focus on Laura's position on the bed. The angle of her head. The placement of her arms. This was not a spontaneous attack. This was controlled from the first second. The killer likely straddled or leaned over her, applied pressure steadily, adjusted grip when necessary. There was no rush. No interruption. That requires emotional containment. Or emotional detachment. Strangers act quickly. They fear being caught. Familiar killers take their time. The lack of defensive wounds is no longer just an observation. It becomes a statement. Laura did not perceive immediate danger. She may have been speaking to her killer moments before. She may have been reassured. Her trust was used against her. As the internal case strengthens, the decision is made to bring Mark Bennett in again, this time under different terms. Not a friendly interview. A recorded interrogation, with legal counsel present. Mark agrees. He has little choice. Refusal would speak loudly now. The room is the same size as before, but the tone is different. The questions begin gently, then narrow. Timelines are challenged. Minor inconsistencies are introduced deliberately, not to trap him but to see how he reacts. Mark remains composed. Too composed. He does not raise his voice. He does not ask to stop. He answers patiently, as if expecting this moment. When confronted with the idea that someone close to Laura killed her, Mark does not recoil. He nods slowly, says it's possible, says closeness can hide darkness. It is an odd response. Philosophical. Detached. He speaks about killers in general terms, as if discussing a concept, not a crime that shattered his life. Investigators watch carefully. They note that he never once says, "I didn't do it," unless directly asked. And even then, the denial feels formal, procedural, not emotional. The interrogation lasts hours. It yields no confession, but it yields something else. A shift. Mark is no longer just cooperating. He is managing the narrative, choosing words carefully, anticipating questions. He has thought about this moment before. After the interrogation, prosecutors are briefed. The question is no longer who, but can we prove it? Circumstantial cases are difficult. Familial ones even more so. There is no murder weapon. No DNA. No eyewitness. The case rests on access, motive, behavior, and the story the evidence tells when aligned. Prosecutors hesitate. They know the defense will argue bias, tunnel vision, the unreliability of memory decades later. They know a failed trial would cement doubt forever. The decision is made to proceed cautiously. No arrest yet. More work. The news leaks anyway. It always does. Headlines break the story with careful language. Victim's brother named suspect in 1992 cold case. The community reacts with shock, disbelief, anger. Some defend Mark fiercely. Others say they always suspected. Memory reshapes itself instantly, rewriting emotions to fit new information. Mark's life begins to unravel quietly. Friends stop calling. Employers distance themselves. He is not charged, but he is marked. Suspicion follows him into grocery stores, into cafes, into silence. He releases a short statement through an attorney, denying involvement, expressing heartbreak that his name has been dragged through the mud. The words are polished, legal, empty. For Laura, something changes too. Her story is no longer just tragedy. It is betrayal. The narrative sharpens. She is no longer killed by an unknown evil, but potentially by the person she trusted most. This reframing hurts more. It reaches deeper. Cold case detectives know they are close to the edge of what evidence can do. They push further, reviewing Mark's behavior after the murder. They note that he never pursued answers aggressively, never demanded updates, never pressured police. Grief can explain that. Or guilt. They look at his movements after Laura's death. He moved away within a year, changed routines, cut ties. Reinvention is not proof, but patterns accumulate. As Part 4 draws to a close, the case stands in a precarious balance. Enough to accuse in the court of public opinion. Not yet enough to arrest. The truth feels near, close enough to touch, but still just out of reach. And in that space between suspicion and certainty, the most dangerous thing of all begins to form. A story that makes sense. Time does something strange when a cold case begins to thaw. It doesn't move forward. It circles. It drags the past back into the present and forces everyone to look at it under a harsher light. For investigators, for families, for suspects, the calendar becomes meaningless. Every day feels like 1992 again. After the news breaks, detectives brace for noise. Tips flood in. Old neighbors, former coworkers, people who once knew Laura Bennett or claimed they did. Some stories are useless. Some are cruel. A few, however, add texture to a life that had been flattened by time and headlines. Laura was careful, methodical. She kept lists, grocery lists, work lists, personal notes. Most were discarded long ago, but one notebook had been saved by her parents, tucked into a box marked important. It had never been considered evidence. It is now. The notebook is ordinary, spiral-bound, blue cover. Inside are reminders, phone numbers, fragments of thoughts. Toward the back, detectives find something that had once seemed insignificant. Repeated mentions of Mark. Not affectionate. Not angry. Concerned. Talk to Mark again. Same worries. Mark upset. Feels trapped. Need to set boundaries. Boundaries. The word changes everything. This is not the language of casual sibling closeness. This is the language of someone trying to manage emotional pressure. Someone feeling responsible for another adult's stability. Laura does not sound afraid, but she sounds burdened. Behavioral analysts revisit the case with this new context. They discuss the concept of enmeshment, relationships where emotional lines blur, where dependence replaces support, where loss of access feels like abandonment. In extreme cases, violence becomes a way to prevent separation. They do not say Mark fits this profile. They say the profile fits the evidence. Detectives re-interview Laura's closest friend, Karen, who had moved out of state years ago. Karen remembers Laura becoming quieter in the months before her death. Not depressed, just guarded. She had once joked that Mark treated her like a lifeline. Like if I drifted away he'd drown, Laura had said. Karen had laughed. It hadn't sounded dangerous then. Now it does. The cold case unit also uncovers something overlooked in the original investigation. A partial shoe impression near the back of the house. Too faint to identify. Too common to catalog. At the time it was dismissed as unrelated. But when compared to shoes Mark owned in the early 90s, documented in old photographs, the size matches. The tread pattern is similar. Not identical, but close enough to reopen the question. Again, not proof, just pressure. Mark's attorney begins pushing back publicly. He criticizes the investigation for relying on reinterpretations of old memories and psychological speculation. He emphasizes the lack of forensic evidence. He frames the renewed scrutiny as persecution of a grieving brother. Mark himself stays silent. Behind the scenes, prosecutors explore a different angle. After-the-fact behavior. They examine whether Mark made any statements that could be construed as admissions. They review every recorded interview, every offhand remark. They find a sentence spoken during the early days of the investigation, buried in a transcript. I just wanted it to stop, Mark had said. At the time it was interpreted as grief. Now prosecutors debate its ambiguity. Wanted what to stop? The pain? The conflict? The relationship? Language matters, especially when it slips. Another detail resurfaces. Mark had attended grief counseling shortly after Laura's death. Perfectly normal. But in one session note, obtained through consent years later, the counselor wrote that Mark expressed relief mixed with guilt. Relief. The word stands out like a bruise. Relief can mean many things. Relief that suffering is over. Relief that uncertainty is gone. Or relief that a problem has been resolved permanently. The investigation inches forward, but the law demands certainty, not intuition. Detectives know they need something concrete. Something that anchors the narrative to action. They find it in the timeline. Using traffic data models, weather reports, and known routines, they reconstruct Laura's final night minute by minute. The call ends at 10:17 p.m. The estimated time of death is between 10:45 and 11:30 p.m. That window matters. Mark claimed he went to bed shortly after the call. No witnesses. No alibi. Nothing to confirm he stayed home. Investigators check toll records. None. They check parking violations. None. But they check gas station logs near Laura's house. One receipt surfaces from a station 2 blocks away, time-stamped 11:12 p.m. The credit card number is partially obscured, but the issuing bank matches Mark's. The transaction amount matches his typical purchases. The clerk remembers nothing. It is circumstantial, fragile, but it places someone like Mark near Laura's home during the critical window. The case edges closer to a threshold. Prosecutors convene a grand jury review panel, not to indict yet, to assess viability. They present the accumulation. Access, motive, behavioral indicators, timeline inconsistencies, and the gas receipt. The panel is divided. Some believe it's enough to move forward. Others fear it will collapse under cross-examination. While the legal debate continues, the human cost grows. Laura's parents, now elderly, are caught between hope and horror. Hope that their daughter's killer may finally be held accountable. Horror that the killer might be their own son. They refuse to speak publicly. They retreat into silence, carrying a grief that has mutated into something unrecognizable. Mark's isolation deepens. He moves again. changes numbers. His face becomes associated with headlines, not memories. He begins writing long emails to his attorney late at night, dissecting the investigation, correcting phrasing, suggesting alternative interpretations. He is invested. Intensely. Investigators notice something unsettling. Mark seems more concerned with how the story sounds than how it feels. As pressure mounts, detectives decide on one final tactic: a confrontation with evidence he hasn't seen. They call Mark in again. This time they lay out the timeline, the notebook entries, the gas receipt. They do not accuse. They wait. Mark listens. His expression barely changes, but his breathing does. When asked why Laura might have felt the need to set boundaries, Mark pauses longer than before. He says he doesn't remember her saying that. He says people reinterpret things after tragedy. He says Laura needed him as much as he needed her. That last sentence hangs in the air. Needed. Past tense. Permanent. The interview ends without confession. Again. But something has shifted. Detectives leave knowing they are no longer chasing shadows. They are circling a center. As Part 5 closes, the case stands on the brink of transformation. Not resolution. Not justice. But inevitability. The pieces are aligning, not into certainty, but into a story that refuses to fall apart. And sometimes, in the absence of truth beyond doubt, that is what decides everything. The closer a case gets to the center, the quieter it becomes. The chaos fades. The speculation thins out. What remains is a narrow corridor of facts, assumptions stripped bare, every step echoing louder than the last. By the time Part 6 begins, the investigation is no longer asking what happened. It is asking how much can be proven before time runs out. Prosecutors know the truth is not enough. They need a version of events that can survive light, pressure, and attack. A story that makes sense not just emotionally but mechanically. Every movement, every minute, every decision. They return to the house. Laura's home has changed owners twice since 1992. The walls have been repainted, the carpet replaced, but the structure remains. The narrow hallway, the kitchen layout, the back door that opens into shadow. Detectives walk it again, late at night, lights off, recreating the conditions as closely as possible. They measure sound travel. They test sightlines. They map blind spots. One detail begins to matter more than before. The back door showed no signs of forced entry. Laura likely knew her killer, or believed she did. That belief becomes the cornerstone. The prosecution team builds a scenario that does not rely on rage exploding, but on escalation. A conversation that turns sharp. Words that land wrong. Boundaries asserted too late. A moment where control slips and panic replaces reason. Mark had access. Mark had motive. But motive is not just jealousy or dependency. It is fear. Fear of loss. Fear of abandonment. Fear that the one person anchoring your world is about to step away. They consult experts in domestic dynamics, particularly sibling relationships with long histories of emotional imbalance. These experts describe patterns that sound uncomfortably familiar. One sibling becomes the emotional regulator for the other. When regulation fails, the system collapses violently. Again, not proof, but it explains behavior. Investigators also revisit physical evidence with modern tools. The ligature used in Laura's murder had been described vaguely in the original report. A soft object, possibly fabric. It was never conclusively identified. But a photograph remains. A single frame, grainy but preserved. Using digital enhancement, analysts determine the weave pattern is consistent with a bathrobe belt or similar garment. Something common. Something personal. Something that might be grabbed in a moment of desperation, not premeditation. Mark had lived alone. But family photographs from his apartment show a bathrobe hanging on the back of his bedroom door. A detail once meaningless, now unsettling. The defense counters aggressively. They argue confirmation bias. They argue tunnel vision. They argue that investigators, desperate to solve a decades-old case, have chosen a convenient villain. And they are not wrong about one thing. There is no DNA tying Mark to the scene. That absence haunts the prosecution. But then another door opens. A retired evidence technician contacts the cold case unit after seeing a news segment. He remembers something unusual from Laura's case, something that never made it into the official record. A small plastic bag containing fibers collected from Laura's clothing, set aside because they were deemed inconclusive at the time. The bag still exists. It had been stored improperly, nearly discarded during a records purge, but it survived. The fibers are tested using techniques unavailable in 1992. The results are not definitive, but they show similarity to fibers found in Mark's apartment during a search conducted years later, when unrelated property records were archived. Again, not identical, but statistically uncommon. The accumulation grows heavier. The district attorney faces a decision: move forward with charges based on circumstantial convergence, or wait and risk losing momentum forever. Public interest is rising. Media coverage intensifies. Headlines sharpen. Brother under scrutiny. Family ties and fatal night. Mark's name becomes synonymous with suspicion. Under this pressure, something unexpected happens. Mark reaches out. Through his attorney, he requests a voluntary polygraph. Prosecutors advise against relying on it. Polygraphs are inadmissible, unreliable, but behaviorally the request is revealing. Innocent people sometimes ask for polygraphs. Guilty people do too. But the timing matters. Mark wants to control the narrative. The test is administered by an independent examiner. The questions are narrow. Did you kill Laura? Were you present at her house that night? Do you know who killed her? The results are inconclusive. But one response spikes dramatically: the question about being present near Laura's house after 10 p.m. Mark reacts strongly. Too strongly. The examiner notes significant physiological response consistent with deception or extreme stress. Mark's attorney dismisses it as anxiety. Media outlets frame it as suspicion. The truth remains murky. Meanwhile, Laura's voice returns from the past in another way. A cassette tape surfaces from an old answering machine backup, found by a former boyfriend while cleaning out storage. It contains partial messages Laura recorded but never sent. Drafts, rehearsals, conversations she practiced before making difficult calls. One message is addressed to Mark. Her voice is calm, measured, but firm. She says she loves him. She says she can't keep being his only support. She says things have to change. The recording cuts off mid-sentence. For investigators, it is devastating. Not because it proves guilt, but because it humanizes the moment that may have preceded the crime. It transforms speculation into something almost tangible. The defense fights to suppress the tape. They argue it is incomplete, contextless, prejudicial. The judge allows it for consideration, not as direct evidence, but as character context. The walls close in. Mark's behavior shifts again. He stops giving interviews entirely. He stops writing emails. He retreats into silence so complete it alarms even his attorney. He misses appointments. He avoids eye contact during meetings. He loses weight. Isolation does strange things to the mind, especially when guilt and fear begin to blur. Detectives debate whether to apply pressure or step back. They choose patience. Then, a break comes from an unexpected source. A former coworker of Mark's, now terminally ill, contacts investigators. He says Mark once confided in him years ago, during a late-night conversation fueled by alcohol. Mark had spoken about Laura, about how she didn't understand how hard it was, about how, sometimes you just want everything to stop. The coworker insists Mark never confessed, but he remembers the tone, the anger, the despair. The final sentence: if she ever left me, I don't know what I'd do. It is hearsay, but it adds weight. By the end of Part 6, the case has reached a dangerous place. Not because it is weak, but because it is strong in fragments, not absolutes. Every piece alone can be explained away. Together, they form a pressure system that feels ready to collapse into something irreversible. The question is no longer who. It is when. When will the line be crossed? When will suspicion become accusation? When will a brother be officially named the person responsible for ending a life that trusted him? And perhaps most haunting of all, when did that ending truly begin? There is a moment in every long investigation when the case stops belonging to the detectives and starts belonging to the system. Paper replaces instinct. Strategy replaces pursuit. The question is no longer how the crime happened, but whether the story can withstand being told in a courtroom where doubt is not a flaw, but a weapon. By the time Part 7 unfolds, the district attorney's office has quietly begun preparing for something it has avoided for years: formal action. Not an arrest yet. Not charges. But alignment. They begin to shape the evidence into a narrative that can be spoken aloud without collapsing under its own weight. They start with proximity. Not emotional proximity. Physical. A forensic mapping specialist reconstructs Mark's possible route on the night of Laura's death. The drive from his apartment to her house takes 14 minutes at night. 12 if the streets are empty. 8 if the driver ignores lights. In 1992, traffic cameras were rare. But streetlight placement, road widths, and neighborhood quiet hours still tell a story. Investigators time the route repeatedly. They park near the gas station where the receipt was logged. They walk the block Laura lived on. They note how the houses sit close together, how voices carry, how quickly sound dissolves once a door is closed. One thing becomes clear. Whoever killed Laura did not need to rush. There was time. Enough time to talk. Enough time to argue. Enough time to regret. That lack of urgency undermines the idea of a random intruder. A stranger would move fast. A stranger would fear interruption. This crime feels contained, personal, quiet. The prosecution also revisits the absence of defensive wounds. Laura fought, but not wildly. Her injuries suggest confusion more than terror. As if she did not immediately recognize the danger. As if she believed she could reason her way out. That belief once again points inward. Mark's legal team senses the shift. They begin filing motions preemptively. Motions to exclude behavioral testimony. Motions to suppress the cassette tape. Motions to challenge the fiber analysis. They argue cumulative prejudice. They argue the state is constructing a psychological profile in place of evidence. In response, prosecutors refine their approach. They stop emphasizing psychology. They start emphasizing sequence. Call ends. Conversation unresolved. Mark leaves. Mark drives. Mark arrives. Door opens. Words escalate. Object nearby. Panic. Silence. They do not need to prove intention. They need to prove presence and causation. Behind closed doors, they debate whether to seek an indictment based on circumstantial convergence alone. It has been done before. Sometimes successfully. Sometimes disastrously. The age of the case cuts both ways. Jurors respect persistence. They also distrust delay. Then the case changes again. A storage facility outside Fresno is being cleared after a bankruptcy. Boxes are auctioned. One box contains personal papers belonging to a private investigator hired briefly by Laura's parents in the mid-90s. The investigator never found anything conclusive and was let go. His notes were forgotten. Until now. Among the papers is a handwritten timeline. And beneath it, a name circled twice: Mark. The investigator had interviewed Mark independently in 1994. The notes describe Mark as controlled, articulate, but oddly rehearsed. One line stands out. Mentions bathrobe without prompt. That detail sends a ripple through the cold case unit. In Mark's early interviews with police, he had mentioned being at home in his bathrobe the night Laura died. At the time it was irrelevant. Comfort detail. Now it appears again, unsolicited, years later, to a private investigator who had not raised the subject. Why mention it at all? Investigators understand something fundamental about guilt. It leaks. Not as confession, but as unnecessary detail. Innocent memories are messy. Guilty memories are curated. The defense dismisses the notes as unreliable. The investigator is deceased. The notes are hearsay. The court may never allow them. But for the prosecution, they reinforce a pattern they cannot ignore. Mark, meanwhile, begins to unravel. Friends notice he avoids mirrors. He stops answering the door. He becomes obsessed with online forums discussing cold cases, wrongful accusations, and forensic failures. He posts anonymously, arguing passionately about the unreliability of circumstantial evidence. He corrects strangers about legal standards. It is as if he is rehearsing his own defense in public, one comment at a time. Laura's parents break their silence. In a carefully worded statement released through an intermediary, they acknowledge the investigation and express trust in law enforcement. They do not name Mark. They do not deny suspicion. Their restraint is devastating. The public reads between the lines. Media coverage shifts tone. Less speculation. More inevitability. Phrases like impending decision and sources close to the investigation begin appearing. Mark's face appears alongside Laura's in split-screen graphics. Brother and sister frozen in time, separated by a question that refuses to die. Prosecutors schedule a final review meeting. They lay out everything. The call. The notebook. The gas receipt. The fibers. The bathrobe references. The cassette tape. The co-worker's statement. The private investigator's notes. None of it alone is enough. Together it forms a lattice. A structure strong enough to stand if not flawless. They vote. The decision is not unanimous. It never is in cases like this. But it passes. They will move forward. Not with an arrest warrant. Not yet. With a formal designation. Mark Bennett will be named a suspect in the official case file. The language matters. Suspect, not person of interest. Suspect carries weight. It changes how evidence is interpreted. It changes what can be subpoenaed. It changes how the public understands the story. Before the designation becomes public, detectives offer Mark one last opportunity to speak. The interview room is smaller this time. The tone is different. They tell him plainly that the case is moving, that his name will be attached to it permanently unless something changes. Mark listens. He nods. He asks procedural questions. He does not ask about Laura. When they ask if there is anything he wants to say, anything that could clarify misunderstandings, he hesitates. Just long enough to matter. I loved my sister, he says. I'd never hurt her. It is the same sentence he has said for 30 years. The same words. The same order. The detectives note it. They always do. As Part 7 draws to a close, the cold case crosses a line that cannot be uncrossed. The past has been officially disturbed. A family bond has been reclassified as a legal liability, and a man who has lived in the shadow of a crime is about to be pulled fully into its light. The system is in motion now, and it does not stop for regret. Once a name is spoken out loud by the state, everything accelerates. Silence becomes strategy. Words become liabilities. Every movement is observed. Every absence noted. The case is no longer sleeping. It is awake and it is watching. The official designation of Mark Bennett as a suspect sends a shock through the community that had grown used to the crime as history. Old neighbors feel it first. People who once lived on Laura Street remember the night again. The flashing lights. The quiet after. The sense that something had gone wrong in a place where nothing ever did. Reporters knock on doors. Some are welcomed. Most are not. The neighborhood reacts the way all communities do when the familiar turns threatening. Denial, defensiveness, and then a slow, reluctant acceptance that the danger may have always been closer than anyone wanted to believe. For the prosecution, Part 8 is about containment. They limit leaks. They control messaging. They know this is the phase where mistakes are fatal. Not to the case but to credibility. The defense watches closely, waiting for overreach. They get their first opening when a tabloid publishes a headline suggesting an imminent arrest. It is false. The district attorney issues a correction within hours. But the damage is done. Jurors read headlines long before they read jury instructions. Mark's attorney seizes the moment, accusing the state of orchestrating a media trial. He paints Mark as a victim of sensationalism, a man haunted by tragedy and hunted by rumor. He reminds anyone listening that no charges have been filed. Behind the scenes, prosecutors work harder than ever. They subpoena Mark's financial records from the early 90s. Nothing explosive appears. No payments. No unexplained withdrawals. But there is a pattern of small cash advances in the weeks following Laura's death. At the time, they could have been for grief-related expenses. Now they are simply noted. They also review Mark's medical history, therapy sessions, prescriptions, sleep aids, anti-anxiety medication. Again, nothing illegal. But the records show escalating stress in the years following the murder, not decreasing. If Mark were innocent, some argue, wouldn't the weight eventually lift? That assumption is dangerous. Prosecutors know it. They tread carefully. A new witness emerges, drawn out by the publicity. A woman who lived 3 houses down from Laura in 1992. She had reported nothing at the time. She says she didn't think it mattered. She remembers hearing a car door late that night. Not unusual. But she also remembers hearing voices. One male. One female. The tone was sharp. Not screaming. Arguing. She had looked at the clock. 11:05 p.m. Her statement is recorded, corroborated by weather conditions that would have carried sound. Defense attorneys prepare to dismantle her credibility. Memory after decades is fragile, but timing aligns with the gas receipt. The case tightens. Prosecutors consider an arrest, then pull back. They want more. They return to the cassette tape. Audio specialists clean it further. Enhance background noise. They isolate faint sounds beneath Laura's voice. A click. Possibly a pin. Possibly a door. Nothing conclusive. But they note that Laura was practicing a difficult conversation. One she was not sure how to have. The implication is clear. The confrontation was planned. At least on her side. Mark's behavior continues to draw attention. After years of avoiding public places, he appears at a community meeting unrelated to the case. He sits in the back. He listens intently. He says nothing. Someone recognizes him. Whispers ripple. Mark leaves early. He later posts anonymously online about being watched for existing. About how suspicion dehumanizes. About how the past cannot be rewritten without destroying the present. His words are articulate. Controlled. Defensive. Investigators read them. They are not allowed to use them. But they read them. Then a quiet procedural shift changes everything. The district attorney authorizes a secret grand jury presentation. Not to indict, but to preserve testimony. Witnesses are called. Statements are locked in. Timelines are formalized. The case is being frozen in a form that can survive further delay. Mark is not told. When his attorney learns of it, he files an emergency motion, arguing violation of due process. The motion is denied. The state is within its rights. Tension escalates. Laura's parents are called to testify. They speak briefly, carefully. They describe their daughter. They describe their son. They do not accuse. They do not defend. Their neutrality is the most painful testimony of all. Mark's former co-worker testifies. So does Karen, Laura's friend. So does the neighbor who heard the voices. Each story overlaps slightly, enough to form a shape. Not a picture. A silhouette. As the grand jury process unfolds, something else surfaces. An old police report from an unrelated domestic disturbance involving Mark in 1988. No charges. No injuries. But a call was made. A neighbor reported shouting. Mark had been arguing with a girlfriend. The report notes his intensity. His refusal to calm down. His fixation on being misunderstood. The defense argues it is irrelevant. The judge agrees. It will not be admitted. But again, patterns do not need permission to exist. Public reaction fractures. Some believe Mark is being scapegoated because the real killer was never found. Others believe the evidence, though thin, is compelling in totality. Online forums fill with amateur analysis. Timelines. Maps. Theories. People argue about Laura as if she were a character, not a person. Mark watches it all. Near the end of Part 8, the prosecution reaches a conclusion they have been avoiding. They will never have a perfect case. Time has stolen that possibility. What remains is choice. Charge now with risk. Or wait and risk losing everything. They schedule a final decision meeting. Mark receives a message from his attorney the night before. It is brief, cautious, but the subtext is unmistakable. Something is coming. As night falls, Mark sits alone in his apartment. Lights off. Computer on. He rereads old emails. Old messages. He pauses on one from Laura, sent weeks before she died. It is ordinary, kind, unremarkable. That is what hurts most. The ordinariness of the moment before everything broke. And as Part 8 fades, the case hovers at the edge of action, suspended between accusation and collapse, between truth and the version of it the law is prepared to accept. The night before a decision, the city feels smaller. Sounds carry farther. Sirens linger. Even the quiet seems deliberate, as if the past is holding its breath along with everyone else. By the time Part 9 begins, the machinery of justice has wound itself tight, and the only question left is how much force it will take to release it. The prosecutors gather early. No press. No phones. The room smells like burnt coffee and paper. They review the case not as a story, but as a sequence of obligations. Burden of proof. Standard of review. Jury perception. They rehearse the defense's arguments out loud, harsher than any courtroom would allow. Confirmation bias. Familial scapegoating. Memory decay. Absence of DNA. They let those words sting. If the case can't survive here, it won't survive anywhere. Then they do something unusual. They play Laura's cassette tape again. Not for evidence. For grounding. Her voice steadies the room. Reminds them why this matters beyond conviction rates and headlines. She speaks with care. With patience. With the kind of restraint that suggests she believed reason could solve anything. The tape clicks off. The room goes quiet. The decision is made. Not unanimously, but firmly. They will seek an arrest warrant. The language of the warrant is precise. No speculation. No psychology. Just facts phrased carefully, stacked tightly. Access. Opportunity. Inconsistencies. Corroborated timelines. It reads less like a narrative and more like a locking mechanism. Each clause designed to hold under pressure. Across town, Mark receives the call from his attorney minutes before the warrant is signed. The attorney speaks slowly, choosing every word like it might shatter. Mark listens without interrupting. When the call ends, he does not move. He sits at his kitchen table, hands folded, staring at a stain in the wood he has never noticed before. This is the moment people imagine when they think of guilt or innocence revealing itself. Panic, rage, collapse. But reality is quieter. Reality is administrative. Mark showers, dresses, packs a small bag. He deletes nothing. He leaves the apartment neat, orderly, as if someone else might need to understand how he lived. When officers arrive, they knock. They do not break the door. They read the warrant. They use his full name. Mark does not resist. He asks one question softly. Can I call my parents? The answer is no. Not yet. The arrest becomes public within minutes. News alerts explode. The headline travels faster than the facts ever could. Brother arrested in 1992 cold case. Some versions add words like finally and at last. Others hedge with allegedly. Laura's parents learn through a phone call that wakes them from a light sleep they have never fully trusted. They say nothing to each other at first. There is nothing left to say. At the station, Mark is processed, photographed, fingerprinted. The mechanics of it are impersonal, efficient. The same system that once searched for Laura's killer now catalogs her brother as a suspect. The interrogation that follows is different from all the others. There are no tricks, no raised voices, no accusations. The detectives lay out the case as it exists now. The evidence, the statements, the timeline. They do not ask him to explain everything. They ask him to explain one thing. The gap. The minutes between the end of the phone call and the time he claims to have gone to bed. Mark listens. His eyes move, but his face does not. When he speaks, his voice is steady. He repeats his story. He adds nothing. He corrects nothing. They show him the gas receipt. He squints. Says it could be anyone. They show him the notebook entries. He says Laura worried too much. They mention the tape. He looks away. When asked directly if he went to Laura's house that night, he says no. When asked if he knows who did, he says no. The interview ends not with a confession, but with a silence that feels heavier than any admission. Bail is denied. The judge cites the seriousness of the charge, the age of the case, the risk of flight. Mark is remanded into custody. The image of him being led away is broadcast everywhere. He looks smaller than people remember. Older. More fragile. Public reaction fractures again, but deeper this time. Some celebrate. Others recoil. There are vigils. There are protests. People argue about whether justice delayed is justice denied or justice distorted. Laura's name trends online, attached to opinions she never voiced. Inside the jail, time distorts. Mark sleeps poorly, eats little. He writes letters he does not send. He asks for books about law, about wrongful convictions, about grief. He keeps them stacked neatly by his bunk. The defense prepares for war. They file motions to suppress evidence, to dismiss charges based on insufficient proof, to exclude decades-old witness testimony. They argue the arrest is premature, politically motivated, built on coincidence. The prosecution responds point by point. They are calm, measured. They have waited 30 years for this. They are not rushing now. A preliminary hearing is scheduled. This is not a trial. This is a threshold. The judge must decide whether there is enough evidence to proceed, enough to justify dragging this story into the open, where it will either collapse or harden into something final. The courtroom fills early. Reporters line the walls. Laura's parents sit together, hands clasped, eyes forward. Mark enters in cuffs. He does not look at them. Witnesses testify briefly. The neighbor, the coworker, the analyst who reconstructed the timeline. Each voice adds a line to the same outline. No single statement lands like a blow, but together they press. The defense cross-examines aggressively. Memory, bias, motive. They succeed in raising doubt. They always do. Then the cassette tape is mentioned. Not played, just acknowledged. The judge listens, takes notes, asks questions, sharp ones, about the gap, about the receipt, about the absence of DNA. The hearing lasts hours. When it ends, the judge does not rule immediately. He takes it under advisement. The waiting resumes. Outside, the cameras capture Mark being led back to transport. He pauses at the door. For the first time, he looks toward the gallery, toward his parents. Their eyes meet for less than a second. It is enough. As Part 9 closes, the case stands in a place it has never been before. Not unsolved, not resolved, but exposed. The story has been dragged from memory into record, from suspicion into charge. The outcome is no longer theoretical. It is coming. And whatever it brings, it will not feel like victory. Waiting is the most violent phase of justice. It does not bruise the body. It erodes the mind. In the days after the preliminary hearing, time stretches thin, translucent, every hour showing the weight behind it. Nothing happens, and yet everything is happening underneath. Mark sits in a holding cell that smells of disinfectant and old paper. The walls are painted a color meant to calm. It fails. He reads. Stops. Starts again. He replays the same memories until they lose sequence. Until the past is no longer something that happened but something that presses. Across town, the judge rereads transcripts. He circles phrases. He underlines the word gap. He writes absence in the margin, then crosses it out and writes pattern. He knows what the law requires. He also knows what the law avoids admitting, that certainty is rare and decisions are made in fog. The ruling comes on a Tuesday morning. There is enough to proceed, not enough to convict. Not enough to conclude, enough to move forward. The charge stands. The courtroom exhales as one organism. Reporters sprint. Phones light up. The case is officially alive in a way it has never been before. A trial date is set months away. Time is now weaponized by both sides. For the prosecution, Part 10 is about discipline. They narrow. They cut. They resist the urge to tell the whole story and instead commit to telling the strongest version of it. They focus on sequence. They focus on silence. They focus on the idea that some crimes leave no fingerprints, only fractures. They rehearse opening statements that do not open too wide. For the defense, Part 10 is about demolition. They hire experts whose sole purpose is to explain why certainty decays over decades. Memory scientists, forensic statisticians, behavioral analysts who testify that patterns can be projected where none exist. They prepare to turn the state's lattice into a mirage. Mark meets with his attorney daily now. The meetings are procedural, sparse. Mark asks fewer questions than expected. When he does speak, it is often to correct phrasing. He cares deeply about words, about how things are described, about what is said versus what is meant. He does not ask about Laura. The media begins telling the story without waiting for the verdict. They revisit 1992 with archival footage. They show Laura smiling in photographs that were never meant for broadcast. They show Mark beside her at family events, freezing those moments into something ominous. Innocence becomes implication through repetition. Laura's parents stop watching television entirely. Behind the scenes, prosecutors make a discovery that both strengthens and complicates their case. A box of dispatch logs from 1992, long thought incomplete, is digitized. One call stands out. A neighbor called police at 11:22 p.m. to report raised voices, possibly domestic. Officers arrived too late to intervene. The call was logged under a different address by mistake. It was never connected to Laura's case. The voices were described as male and female. The timing aligns. The defense immediately challenges it. They argue mislabeling, misattribution, that the call could have been about any couple on the block. They are right. Could have been. But the coincidence is brutal. The prosecution debates whether to include it. Including it risks overreach. Excluding it risks losing a thread that ties the night together. They include it cautiously with disclaimers. Mark's attorney files a motion to suppress it. The judge denies suppression but allows limited scope. Another fragile piece added to the structure. Inside the jail, Mark begins to change. Not dramatically. Subtly. He stops sleeping altogether. He paces. He memorizes legal arguments. He begins drafting notes for his own testimony, even though his attorney has not decided whether he will take the stand. He writes sentences, crosses them out, rewrites them with synonyms. He practices neutrality. Calm. Measured. Reasonable. Guards notice he becomes agitated when routines change. When meals are late. When lights stay on too long. Control once a private need is now visible. The prosecution watches this from afar through reports and filings. They are careful not to pathologize. They know juries recoil from psychological assassination, but they also know behavior under pressure matters. As the trial approaches, the cassette tape becomes the emotional axis of the case. The defense wants it excluded entirely. The prosecution wants it admitted in limited form. The judge rules it can be referenced but not played in full. Laura's voice will be heard only briefly, carefully, without enhancement. The room will hear her say she needs things to change. That is all. Both sides prepare for that moment. They know it will land harder than any statistic. Mark's parents request a meeting with prosecutors. It is granted. They sit across from each other in a neutral room. No cameras. No recorders. The parents ask one question. Not about evidence. Not about outcome. They ask whether the prosecution truly believes Mark killed Laura. The lead prosecutor answers honestly. He says belief is not the standard. He says they believe the evidence supports the charge. He says the jury will decide the truth. It is not the answer they want. It is the only one he can give. They leave without shaking hands. The night before trial, the city hums differently. The courthouse is lit. Police presence increases. Laura's name trends again, now paired with countdowns and analysis. The word closure is used carelessly. Mark sits in his cell, staring at the ceiling. He whispers Laura's name once. Just once. No one hears it. Trial begins. Jury selection is grueling. People are dismissed for bias, for fear, for having already decided. Those who remain look ordinary. That is what terrifies everyone. Opening statements arrive. The prosecution speaks first. Calm. Linear. They tell a story of access and escalation. Of a relationship under strain. Of a night that ended in silence. They do not call Mark a monster. They call him present. The defense responds with restraint. They talk about time. About memory. About how suspicion grows in the absence of answers. They frame Mark as a man trapped by tragedy twice. Once by loss, once by accusation. Witnesses testify. The neighbor. The coworker. The analyst. The retired technician. Each voice adds pressure, not explosion. The defense chips away. Successfully. Doubt breathes. Then Laura's tape is introduced. Not played yet. Just acknowledged. The courtroom tightens. Mark stares straight ahead. He does not move. When the tape finally plays, it is brief. Laura's voice fills the room, softer than expected. Controlled. Loving. Firm. She speaks of boundaries. of change, of care that has become too heavy. The tape ends abruptly. There is no sound for several seconds. This is the moment everyone will remember, regardless of verdict. The moment when Laura becomes present again, not as a victim, but as a voice interrupted. The defense objects to its emotional impact. The judge overrules gently. The jury listens still. As Part 10 closes, the trial is fully underway. The story is no longer owned by investigators or prosecutors or defense attorneys. It belongs to 12 people who did not know Laura, did not know Mark, and will never know the night beyond what is placed before them. The past has been reconstructed as carefully as possible. Now it must survive judgment. Verdict day arrives without ceremony. No thunder. No music. Just a line of people waiting to hear whether a story that has consumed 3 decades will be sealed or split open forever. The courtroom fills slowly, as if no one wants to rush the moment that will harden memory into record. Mark sits at the defense table, hands folded, posture deliberate. He has learned how to sit this way, neutral, contained. He does not look at the jury. He does not look at the gallery. He looks straight ahead, at nothing in particular, as if eye contact itself might be interpreted as meaning. Laura's parents arrive together. They sit in the same seats they have occupied since the trial began. Their faces are older now than in the photographs that have been shown again and again, older than the memory of the night that never left them. They do not speak. They hold hands. The jury files in. 12 ordinary lives carrying an extraordinary weight. The judge asks if they have reached a verdict. They have. No one breathes. The foreperson stands. Her voice is steady, practiced by the time it leaves her mouth, though it will echo inside her for years. She reads the words that were debated, dissected, feared, and prayed over. Guilty. The sound is not explosive. It is dull, heavy, like something being set down rather than struck. Laura's parents do not cry. They close their eyes. Mark's shoulders dip just slightly, the first visible break in months. His attorney places a hand on his arm. Mark does not look at him. He does not look at anyone. The judge thanks the jury for their service. He reminds them that the burden was high, that the decision was difficult, that their verdict reflects the law as it stands. He schedules sentencing. He orders Mark remanded into custody. The courtroom empties in fragments. Outside, cameras capture the moment the verdict becomes public property. The word solved appears in headlines within minutes. It is printed in bold, as if certainty can be declared by typeface alone. But inside the building, nothing feels solved. In the days that follow, the verdict is dissected from every angle. Legal analysts argue about circumstantial cases. Psychologists debate the interpretation of behavior. Commentators argue whether justice was done or merely concluded. Online, strangers argue about Laura as if she were a symbol, not a person. Mark's defense files an appeal immediately. Ineffective counsel. Prejudicial evidence. Cumulative bias. The process begins again, slower this time, colder. At sentencing, Mark speaks. He does not confess. He says he loved his sister. He says he did not kill her. He says the system needed an ending and chose him. His voice is calm, controlled. The same voice the jury heard on tape and in interviews. Some hear sincerity. Others hear performance. The judge listens. Then he speaks. He talks about Laura. About her life beyond the night that ended it. About the weight of loss that never expires. He sentences Mark according to the statute. Decades in prison. A lifetime measured legally. The gavel falls. That sound is final. Years pass. Appeals are denied. One by one. The courts affirm the verdict, citing the totality of the evidence. Not certainty. Sufficiency. The language is precise. Unemotional. Mark disappears into the system. Laura's parents age quietly. They do not give interviews. They do not attend anniversary vigils. They keep Laura's photograph in the same place it has always been. They live with a conclusion that does not feel like peace but does allow sleep. The community moves on the way communities always do. New families move into Laura's old house. The street is repaved. Trees grow taller. The night becomes just another night again. But the case does not vanish. Years later, a documentary revisits it. Then another. Each retelling sharpens certain details and blurs others. The cassette tape becomes iconic. Laura's voice becomes the emotional center of a story she never chose to tell. Mark gives one interview from prison. He says nothing new. He maintains his innocence. He speaks about memory, about how repetition creates belief. He says people needed a villain. He says grief is persuasive. When asked if he thinks the case is truly solved, he pauses. I think, he says carefully, that people confuse answers with truth. The interviewer does not press him. In private, investigators who worked the case remain divided. Some believe completely. Others admit, quietly, that the absence of DNA still troubles them, that they wish they had more, that they wonder, late at night, whether certainty was earned or assembled. But they also remember Laura's tape, her notebook, the escalation, the silence after. They remember the shape of the case. And shapes matter. Years later still, a law professor uses the case as an example in class. He does not tell students what to think. He asks them whether justice requires perfection or decision. He asks them what they would have done with the same evidence. The room never agrees. That is the legacy of cold cases. They do not end. They settle. Laura's name remains tied to 1992, to California, to a story that crossed from mystery into judgment. The official record lists the case as closed, solved, a conclusion reached. But for those who lived inside it, the word feels too small. Because something remains. A gap. Not in the timeline but in the soul of the story. The space where certainty should live but doesn't. The place where love and harm overlap. Where memory refuses to behave. Where a sister's voice lingers just long enough to remind everyone that endings are often administrative, not emotional. The tape still exists. So does the night. And even now, long after the verdict, when the city grows quiet and the past feels close enough to touch, there are people who lie awake wondering whether justice was found, or whether it was simply the only answer that could stand. The case is closed. The questions are not. And that is the true echo of every cold case that claims to be solved.